trauma. Yes, we've all heard the word and we've all experienced it. So, what better way to unbox all of that than episode 53 of the Positivity Experience? It's all about trauma. Check it out. Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 53 of the Positivity Experience. I'm your girl Lori. Man, we had so much snow here. I'm so excited. We had snow right after you probably listened to this podcast last week. We had a foot of snow, which is beautiful. I love snow. One thing you guys will learn about me very quickly, the mountains are my place. This does not mean that I don't go to the beach or I don't like the beach. It's just I prefer the mountains. So we had a foot of snow, and then we had like another couple inches last night. So Sienna only had like one day of school this week. But this is my jam. Like, I love this. I feel like it's so quiet and beautiful, and you just embrace the things that are around you and you find the joys in it, right? And another thing that I'm playing around with is I'm thinking about doing a Patreon only, like one episode a month, like for like $10 or something if you subscribe, because it does cost something to do a podcast. It's not like just free. And I want to avoid using lots of sponsors. This does not mean I'm going to promise you I will never use sponsors, because it would have to be something that I really resonate with. But I don't want to just do sponsors just to have the money coming in. But it does cost me something. So I'm thinking if I did a Patreon episode where you got like one bonus episode a month, might be helpful. So I'm playing around with that and possibly taking donations and stuff, just because, you know what, it keeps me afloat, and this way it's not so hard on just me, you know what I mean? So anyway, that's my plan. I'm going to play around with that, and I'll let you guys know more about that. But I want to talk to you about trauma today. Okay, so if you're new here, first of all, hey, welcome. So you guys know I'm 50. I'll be 51 here in a couple months. Paul's birthday's tomorrow, so he'll be 50. We'll finally be the same age. But, you know, you guys have heard my story a lot, and you'll read it in my second book in late spring, and, you know, lots of trauma. And I think the biggest thing for you guys to know is it's not a competition, all right? You don't have to be like, well, my trauma was worse than their trauma. Okay, it's trauma. And trauma is very real to anybody who's experienced the trauma and whatever it is, right? So I've worked with Vietnam veterans. It's one of the big groups that I actually work with. And, you know, they've seen a lot of things. And then you have like my molestation and all of my abuses. And, okay, that's trauma. And trauma isn't necessarily, it doesn't always have to be on such a high level. It doesn't have to just be abuse or cheating or, you know, yes, those are all traumas. But your trauma could be a bad relationship. Right? Could be being told you couldn't do anything right. Being told, trauma comes in many forms. Again, not a competition. Okay. And don't ever diminish what your experience was in your trauma as like demeaning it and being like, oh, well, God, people have it so much worse than me. Believe it or not, I have a lot of clients who struggle with like accepting that their trauma is valid for them. Right? Because they're looking and going, but other people have it so much worse. Great. Agree. Here. Love it. But what about you? Right? Like, your trauma is valid to you. But here's the tricky part. You don't get to live in your trauma. This is probably one of the things, and I definitely have a full chapter on this in my book, is that's probably one of the most freeing things on the planet that ever happened to me, is when I came to the realization after much work. This is long before the education to get here and the work of doing this professionally. This is when I was going through my healing, which was years, by the way. You know, number one, don't think that your trauma healing is just going to be couple sessions, and then you're healed. Plus, you have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to let things go. So there's a lot that comes into that, right? But I was thinking about the time that me and my friend Terry, 19, 20 years old, had a fake ID, would go to bars. We would officially go to bars, have drinks, and fight. Like, that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to go, we're going to dance, we're going to get drunk, and we're going to fight, right? Because I had a lot of things, a lot of aggression. I was a very angry human being. Very angry, right? And it's one of those things that I'll tell you, that anger never did me any good. It was very isolating. I always got up in the morning and would feel like I was ready to attack and beat everybody's ass throughout the day. Everybody owed me something. Everybody should feel sorry for me. Everybody should do things the way I want them done. Now, this was definitely reared its head probably around 15. Doesn't mean that I didn't experience the trauma, but it was very much, I was very victimed. Like I was very much in a victimizing victim situation in my brain, like very sad up to 15. And then I became angry. Angry, was going to do whatever I needed to do to get by, didn't give a shit. And it became extremely problematic till I was about 25. Okay, so this was a good 10-year run. Okay, a good 10-year run of me just being angry and miserable and envious and jealous and why me and going through all of those things. And oh my God, what a horrible way to be, right? And I'm telling you, that became my normal. That became my normal. For me to like, if you looked at me sideways, I'd be like, what bitch? What, you want to throw down? Let's go. Like I was ready to fight as much as people go to the bathroom. Like I was ready to do it because I was so angry, right? But anger is not a true emotion. Anger comes from fear, frustration, and hurt. And mine was pretty much all of that. So between things, and I go into it a little bit deeper in the book, but my dad, 16 years old, 16. And it was when we were living in the hood and we're sitting at the table, he and I, and we're eating dinner. And you know, my dad was not faithful to either of his wives, not my mom or my sister's mom. And it's just my dad, right? My dad was bipolar. We know this now. He was an alcoholic, a little pedophilia. Like there's a lot that came into that. And I remember him saying to me, clear as day, I can't remember half the times what I did 5 minutes ago, but there's certain things that stay in your head. I remember him looking at me and saying, you know, Lori, you know, a couple things. So all men cheat. Okay. So when you get into a relationship, all men cheat. And, you know, got to keep your men sexually happy. Okay. So in my brain, this was the narrative because I knew dad was cheating on mom. I knew he had cheated. Well, I didn't know till later, but like around this time, I already knew he had ghosted out on my sister's mom, but told my mom he was divorced, but never got to, it was a whole thing. It was, I'm telling you, reading the book, you're going to be like, oh, Jerry Springer wrote this book. Yeah. I mean, it's super dysfunctional. So, and this was before I was even born, right? So, you know, sitting there with that, this immediately put in my head, zero trust, zero, not just trust in myself, zero trust in other people. And that, you know, sex was how, you know, sex is that's what you got to do. You got to put out all the time or your people are going to step out. Right. So this was what was told to me. Now this after, of course, all the molestation, the verbal abuse, the physical abuse, the getting ripped out of bed at, 1 o'clock in the morning because there were dishes in the, not sink, but in the, we didn't have a dishwasher. So like in the little dish drain, you know, the little thing when you wash your dishes and you dry them, like back in the day, you'd like put them in this little, like, I can't think of it. Anyway, they'd dry off. My dad was hell-bent on zero dishes because he was in the military at one point. So 0 dishes in the sink. Everything had to be in order, which is hilarious because our house, after my mom passed, we had 500 mice in the walls. Dude, stop it. Like, you don't get to pick and choose when you decide that this is what you're going to do. But he would yank me out of bed and so I never knew what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. Now that's in my teenage years. Definitely in my childhood years between, you know, my mom being sick for pretty much after I was 6, right? My mom was sick the rest of her life with me. And, you know, my brother and sister were into drugs heavily. My sister tried to run my dad and I over. My brother tried to pull guns on my dad left and right. Lots of suicidal attempts by my sister. Just a lot of things, you know. Kim, my best friend Kim, and I would go, my brother, Jack, and his friend, we called him Slick because his head was slicked back. His hair was slicked back. Jack and Slick, we'd watch them do cocaine and then they would spin us around the room. Like they'd grab one arm and one leg and they'd take you up and down like a helicopter. Ample times I almost like bashed my head up against the wall and into corners and, you know, grew up in a bar with my dad. So trauma is familiar to me. And trauma, living in that trauma became normal for me. Staying in that dysfunctionality, as uncomfortable as it was, became comfortable for me. discomforting, but comfortable because I knew how to respond on eggshells, right? Because if you've ever lived with an alcoholic, and somebody who's an alcoholic with mental instability, like my dad and my siblings, and then of course like-minded people typically roll with like-minded people. So then we had a lot of it was just a lot of dysfunction at all given times. Right. And there was always those fine windows of 45 minutes where everybody was in a great mood because they'd get a good buzz on. But after that, it would be downhill. Or if they weren't drinking enough, it was downhill. So you never knew. So I became very accustomed to living on the eggshells, living in a very, unstable space, which created enormous anxiety. Right. That's when I was back and forth to the hospital all the time thinking I was dying with anxiety attacks. I didn't know what they were at the time. And then, then you fast forward that ahead and, I think about all of the times that I purposefully would sabotage anything that would remotely look like it might work out for me. I'd be like, well, what would I do that for? Every time I get my hopes up, shit just goes south, right? And I know a lot of you out there listening have that catastrophic thinking, and you're like, well, I don't want to go getting comfortable in my life and feeling happy and then it be taken from you. When you live in a fear state, take it from a person who did it an enormous amount of time. I mean, years and years. It is never going to give you that peace that you think that you're looking for. That is a control 101. So as I was going through many diagnoses, I was diagnosed with borderline, which I was therapied out of, right? You can get therapized out of borderline. Because remember, I went to what I call crazy school, which is basically, I call it crazy school. That's what I've called it. My sister called it that. My sister was in St. Elizabeth's, which years ago was this really bad mental facility. She had shock treatment. So she called intensive outpatient crazy school. So that's what I call it for me. I went to crazy school, right? And I was happy to go to crazy school because I was to the point to where not just unaliving, having homicidal thoughts and all of these incredible things that were going on. And, then when I had Jasmine, my daughter who I gave up, I had the severe postpartum depression and everybody told me what a horrible human being I was because I was not attached to this child. And, so the judgment from others, no one showing up for me, right? So my mom's family, super close down in Tennessee. I mean, I don't even know if there's anybody's left. I'm very much away from anybody like that, any family. And it's not out of avoidance, and I'm healed, and I continue to heal every day, but I'm not going to expend energy in places that I just don't want to have energy. So because nobody really liked my dad, because he would either borrow money or he was just dad, I purposefully became the black sheep because of my dad, right? I'm a kid, but I was judged by the sins of the father, so to speak, right? And so I remember my cousin Shirley, which is my mom's sister's daughter. So I think that makes her my first cousin. And remember, my parents were much older. My mom was 44 and my dad was 49 when they had me. And so my cousin is I'm 50. She's almost 80, right? They're older than me. And it's interesting because she's fairly wealthy and definitely was super wealthy in my eyes growing up because they had a helicopter pad. They live in Virginia and all these things. And we would go to their house. And I remember when I moved back after I got divorced from Gene, my first husband. And I don't know why I ended up going down there, but I ended up going down to her house. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. It was 20 years ago. I was in my 30s. It wasn't yesterday, but it wasn't 100 years ago. And we talked. And I said, did you know what was going on? I said, because in my brain, everybody knew what was happening. And she goes, oh, yes, everybody knew what was happening. The way your father would dress you at 13 and 14, like a full grown woman and dress and heels and short skirts. And yes, we knew something was wrong. So, I asked the normal question. So did y'all not want to do anything or what was going on? Again, I had already been in the healing state, so I'm not angry. I don't want to fight people. I avoid that like the plague, but it's not avoiding it. I've learned how to take my power back. I learned to take my power back. And again, it wasn't overnight. We'll talk about it. But it's interesting because she said, well, you know how your dad is. Your dad kept you away from us. So in my brain, in a dysfunctional brain of my old trauma, I'd be like, well, that's not a good enough reason. But in my healed brain, I was like, well, I mean, I get it. I mean, you can only do what you can do, right? And so, I mean, I'm not angry. But the amount of time, and when I decided, listen, I got so sick and tired of being so miserable. See, the thing is, you get comfortable being miserable, but you say you're not, but you really are because you don't want to do the work to get out of it. And the more you try to be in control and the more your ego comes into play, and trust me, my ego was flared because I thought everybody owed me something because of my dad and my mom passing, and oh, feel sorry for me and you should feel bad for me. And every relationship I get into, friendship or love relationship, they should really just understand my trauma. They owe it to me. No, they don't. They do not. And I've been through multiple, early on, I was through multiple psychiatrists because then I became an anomaly. Because at the time, I thought I was schizophrenic because I could hear people, but not like, I was like, okay, well, I see people. I see dead people. Obviously, they're crazy. My dad told me since I was a child, you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. Well, because, and you think he would have known, like people in his side of the family and my mom's side of the family all have a intuitive ability, right? And he knew this, but my mom tried to church it out of me and my dad just told me I was crazy. So I never felt like I fit in with anybody. And I was hopeful, so hopeful that I was adopted. I kept saying, please let me be adopted. Please let me be adopted. Let me find my birth family. Like I was, that was in my woe is me. And I think as a child, it's normal to go through that woe is me because you don't have any tools. I had no tools, but to sit and complain and stay in my trauma. And it just wasn't working for me. And so right after I gave Jasmine up, I was 23. And I had already been in and out of therapy, but then I went super hardcore into therapy. Super hardcore. I was like, you know what? I know that there's a better place because energetically, I've always been involved with like different kind of shamans and different energy people because they knew. And here's the deal. This is my journey. This is the journey I was meant to walk. When I accepted this was the journey I was meant to walk versus why did I have to walk this? Why couldn't I have better parents? Why didn't I get treated better? Why? And when I got out of that mentality, due to therapy, life coaching, also a ridiculous amount of energy work. I mean, the amount of retreats I've gone on, the amount of healing, like when I became a shaman, you have to kind of strip through all of that trauma. So my trauma healing has been an ongoing thing for over 30 years. Over 30 years. And I continuously work on it every day. Okay? So when I see people go, well, I can't do that, I'm thinking, oh, fuck, you can. Because I've been there. There's nothing somebody can say, be like, oh, but I have ADHD. Yeah, I have ADHD, OCD. I was borderline personality disorder. I was therapized out of that after 5-6 years. Right? And BPD a lot of times will come from severe traumas. Okay? They diagnosed me with borderline personality. Bipolar disorder, 1 rapid cycling, which we found out later on. No, that's not what was going on. I had high functioning anxiety and depression mixed, which I know sounds like, well, that's bipolar. It isn't. And so over a period of time, I started working with, so this is when I started going to it as like a profession, because I needed to know why my brain was the way it was. I needed to know why I was allowing all these people around me to affect me. Okay. Like I understand the trauma inflicted upon me and inflicted upon you as a child is never your responsibility. However, healing that trauma is 10,000% your responsibility. No one owes you to heal your trauma, and no one's going to. Again, another revelation I had to come to over a period of time. Because just because you had it bad and you've had trauma, you have anxiety, you have ADHD, you have all those things, it's a reason until it becomes an excuse. You cannot allow your reason to become an excuse. It can be a reason why you want to study harder, but you can't because you're ADHD. That's a reason. So you find a new solution, whether it be medication, whether it be therapy, whether it be new tools. But see, one of the things that I remember the most, right, is that for me, I was very expendable to people, right? Unfortunately, not my mom. She was sick. She could only do what she could do, right? Literally, she was like paralyzed on her left side. She had a heart attack. She had a stroke. She had hairy cell leukemia. She had all these things going on with her. And she was tired. And she had such severe anxiety that if something just happened out of left field, she'd pass out. Her mechanism was passing out at any given time, right? And so I never saw any good tools to handle stress or anxiety or I never knew the good tools. It was either going to be alcohol, which God knows I went down that path. It was either going to be alcohol, not drugs though, because drugs scared the shit out of me. I did a half a line of cocaine one time, half a line at 15 at my friend's dad's house. And oh my gosh, you want to talk about set my anxiety off? They had to give me a downer. So now I was on cocaine. Then they had to give me a lower, like a downer to calm me down. I was like, okay, that sucked. And I tripped on acid one time when I was 16. I actually had a good trip. But I was like, yeah, I don't like this. I kind of like the whole alcohol vibe a little bit more, right? And then I was just like, okay, none of this is good for me. This does not mean that I don't just go and have some drinks from time to time. And when I do it right. But I'm in such a better place now, right? But here's the deal. That did not happen overnight. And I'm 50, okay? How am I going to sit there and keep holding on to stuff that happened to me in my teenage years? Yes, it does make me who I am. And I am okay with the experience that I went through. I don't victimize myself by saying, oh God, I wish I'd have had it better. I wish I could have been like, Tiffany down the street, or I wish I had it like Kim's mom. And, you're allowed to sit there for a minute because it's a normal reaction. But when you live there in that trauma and you decide that it's too painful that you don't want to heal, you will stay imprisoned. I promise you, it's not a maybe, you will. And then you'll become codependent. Oh God, I had codependent issues, which I think if I do this Patreon thing, I want to do a whole episode on codependency. But here's the thing with that, right? I became codependent because I felt like I needed other people to make me feel safe because I never felt safe. And the more I looked externally to find other people to try to make me feel safe, it became so dysfunctional. What you doing? Where are you going? Oh my God, you didn't call me. Do you love me? Oh my God, I was nauseating. So over a period of time, right, between my educational stuff and dealing with these like super smarty pants, like scientists and brain scientists and studying the human behavior and why things happen, between that and the immense amount of energy work and accepting my ability of being able to see dead people, because listen, I was kind of okay with thinking I was schizophrenic. It made sense to me until it didn't, because I'd go in, I'd talk to psychiatrists, and I'd be talking to their dead people from time to time, and they'd just look at me. They'd like, I don't have an answer for you. Like that, I know exactly who you're talking to. I'm like, well, then I don't know what to tell you, right? So I went through, let's see, they had me on blood pressure medication. Then they had me on psychotic medication. Then, I have been a lab rat. I have been a study rat. People have analyzed me and picked my brain and looked at my body. And trust me, been there, done that like a needle cushion. Okay. And the funny thing is, when I accepted that I am not a product of the trauma, that it was just a catalyst to put me where I am today, to have this podcast to talk to you on. Oh my God, to me, that's great. I'm not co-signing for you guys to go enjoy your trauma. But what I am saying is, I'm not in the, well, why did this happen to me? I'm in that, okay, well, why not? Okay, cool. I'm here now. What can I do with it? But again, remember, it's a daily practice. If you're not consistent in healing yourself, you're going to stay stuck. If you get triggered and you avoid your triggers, nope. Again, not on your own, like with me or with somebody else. You can't avoid it. Stop making it seem like if you don't deal with it, it's going to be fine. It is not. You've got to feel it to heal it. Okay? It is imperative that you feel it to heal it, that you allow it to come up. And I don't hold ill will against my dad. Legitimately. Listen, it was not all bad. I told you, he taught me how to play professional pool. He taught me how to play poker. I rock star for a while. That was my profession. Early on, 18, 19, we just hustled people at the bar. It became fun. So it wasn't all bad. And I don't villainize my dad. I know it sounds like he was this horrible human being. He was not. He was doing the best he could with what he had. And no, it's not a trauma bond. It's not me making excuses. No, was he wrong? Was it painful? Of course it was. But my dad was only good with the tools he had. So for me to sit there and hold on to that will never serve my best and highest good. If I constantly blame my cousin for not calling DIFUS, which is like Child Protective Services. My brother actually did call Child Protective Services, and he and I weren't even close. And God, I wanted that relationship with him so bad until I was like 14 when I left. But I wanted it, but he hated my dad, and he had his own drug problems going on. Him and my sister Dee have since passed, But he did. He called Child Protective Services. They came in the house because there was 500 mice there. They came in. And they were like, are you okay? I'm like, yes, I'm fine. Oh my God, that's the trauma bond where I had the out and I didn't take it. And so many of us with a trauma bond, you have the out and then you just don't take it, right? And I feel like that's because you don't have the tools. So again, if you're staying in your victimization because you're saying, I'm a damaged product or this happened to me, you will stay stuck. You've got to face it. You got to come to the other side of it. Like I take clients all over the world. You guys know that. In the show notes, like in the description of this podcast, will be my like website and some other links. If you want to link up with me, we can always work one-on-one. You don't have to, but I'm giving you that as an option. And I told you this before. I don't care. I've had so much education and knowledge. Oh, beautiful. Do you know what I'm most proud of? My life. My life experience is what I'm most proud of, not anything else. Because I love me for me. I was told how crazy I was, how wrong I was. I had the binge eating disorder because, and that rears its ugly head from time to time. I'm okay with it. I walk hand in hand with her. I appreciate her. She served me for many years. She served me, right? And so when you get to the space of accepting that your trauma, it doesn't break you. It can build you. But it is I stayed broken for a long time. And there was that part of me that felt like I needed that because I felt like in this power, like I said, like the world owed me something, and it did not. Okay? So when you are going through your trauma and you're feeling your trauma, there's a few things you got to know. Just because you have the trauma, somebody else doesn't have to treat you with kid gloves. Somebody else doesn't have to understand your anxiety. Other people don't have to make you feel more comfortable because it makes you comfortable. There's the acceptability of that. There's the acceptability that only you can give yourself that power back. And it was like several aha moments, right? Like through that, like I said, therapy, traditional therapy was great. Okay, it was. For me, it was great. But it was the other things, the other part of my, when I was working with various life coaches, when I was working with different shamans, when I was becoming shaman, when I was doing all of the energy work, when I was working with different alternative practitioners and, other psychiatrists and psychologists. And I was fine with it. I'd be like, ugh, it's just me and my stupid bipolar. Or even at the time, I thought I was bipolar. I wasn't. Find out later, it's like high functioning anxiety. And so when I got into that and when I really dropped the ego, and ego, right? Ego is like, you owe me, you owe me, you owe me. Make me feel better. You apologize to me. When I dropped that ego and checked the ego at the door, not got rid of it, but appreciated it, said thank you, appreciated where it had me, and now I'm here. And anytime she starts to flare, I'm like, oh, no. And she's really good now. Like that part of my body, I give everybody little titles, he and she, because that's all part of me. And it really helped me going through my trauma healing to identify my anxiety as a separate being, to identify my sadness as a separate being, but understanding that they're all part of me. And when I was able to do that, I was able to address them individually and appreciate them for where they are. Right? So yeah, everybody has trauma and it's kind of shitty, right? But are you going to take that trauma and use that for a springboard, or are you going to allow it to sink you like an anchor? Oh, I allowed that. You don't want that. You don't want that. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. I know that's harsh, but it's true. I felt sorry for myself like it was a profession. It's never going to serve you. Okay? And if you're looking for other people to pay, you got to pay. You got to make me feel better. They don't. You have to get to a place of acceptance. You don't get to say things like, well, that's how I was raised. Well, that's due to the trauma. That's why I am the way I am. No, that's how you got here. That's how you got here. Reason, not excuse. And then you have to say to yourself, okay, well, clearly I had no control over what was going on there. Acknowledge it, accept it, observe it, feel it. But now what are you going to do about it? Because it's not for anybody else to make it better for you. And for you to hold on to animosity, I'm literally not angry with my father or anybody else in my life like that. And trust me, in that time, I felt not only isolated and alone and broken and damaged, but I felt useless. I felt hopeless. I felt worthless. I felt like I wasn't going to be anything but a whore because at 13, my dad told me that. And I was still a virgin. So you have to realize I wasn't necessarily given any stepping stones other than shitty ones. That's not their fault, though. I mean, it really isn't anybody's fault. It's people are doing the best they can with what they have. Again, I'm not permissing it, but I'm also not holding it against them, which is why I don't engage in battle with people. I told you, if someone on my socials try to come at me some kind of trolly way, I'm just going to block you. I'm not going to argue with you. You're an asshole. Yep. Block. I mean, I'm good. Don't engage in things because you need to let somebody know they're not getting over on you. Let them win the day. Go win the day. Hurt people. When you become good in self-love and you accept where you are and you accept that your past is your past and it has made you who you are today, and you don't get to say, yeah, and look at me, I'm a piece of shit. You're not. You're just telling yourself you don't have the capability of having those tools, and that's not true. That's a false narrative. Your trauma is real to you, but don't stay there. It's not okay. Okay. And I'm telling you, and like I said, I go into it a lot deeper in my book, and I'm not quite done with it yet, but I'll have a date hopefully soon. And if I do this Patreon, that'll be like the first place I launch it. But, it is something that I just wanted to share with you guys, because I think so many people, and this is always so funny, people see me as this middle-aged white woman. And I'm like, okay, you have no clue. Like, I grew up in the hood. I was slinging drugs on the corner. I was, there's so many things I was doing. Don't look at me and think, oh, middle America. Okay. I never thought I would even be able to own a house. I was 40 before I bought my house. I just told you I'm 50. I bought this month will be 11 years. Right, because I'll be 51. So I never thought I could do it because it was for rich people. It was for all these things and no. Until I knew that I had the power, and I knew I had the power because all of the energy work I did. When I started to understand how the universe works, how abundance works, and how letting go of the negativity and go ahead, just win the day, people. Hey, if you don't want to do something, don't do it. Don't give excess information after a no. Let them call you rude. Let them call you self-absorbed. When you are good with yourself, you will never, ever be triggered by another person like that. You might feel a little like zing. You might be like, oh, that's right. It's not my stuff. So I tell you this and I share this with you because everything I talk about on all my socials and my podcast and with my clients, I don't just have the education for it. I've lived it. Maybe not your experience, and maybe not your exact feeling, but the trauma, I've lived it. Every human around you has some form of trauma, and somebody's trauma isn't more important than somebody else's trauma. So stop telling yourself that narrative too. But you do not get to use your trauma as an excuse, right? So you need to ask yourself this question now. Okay? Am I going to stay in a space where I feel lost, stuck, and traumatized? Am I going to stay there because it's discomfortable? It's uncomfortable, but it's comfortable enough because you kind of know what that's like. Or are you going to go ahead and go through healing you? If you lose people, you lose them. You got to be okay with that. Because if you're not okay with that, you will forever be looking for other people to make you good. And other people to agree with you, and other people to big you up, and other people to say, yeah, that's the right decision. They're not going to be able to tell you that if that's not what they agree with. So trusting yourself and building self-esteem and building self-confidence is doing the things that you fear. Okay? And like I said, you can work with me or you can work with somebody else. But you can't do this just by yourself and reading 3 or 4 self-help books. because you're only going to do that based on the fact of the safety that you're reading something in. You got to push yourself out of it. And you guys know, I know some of you on here are my amazing clients, and I love you guys so much. I love you and I value you guys so much. You have no idea. No idea. But you guys are the reason I do what I do. You guys are the reason I do what I do. Yeah, I'm strong and I did it and I came out on the other side and I have to practice it every day, right? And I'm doing it to share with others and you guys are here for it. So the amount of gratitude I have for you, I can't even put it in words, right? So understand you are important. You are relevant. But if you stay stuck in your trauma and you refuse to treat it and you refuse to allow yourself to forgive, release, and be with just self and know that you do have the power, then you're going to stay stuck. But if you wake up and you say, you know what? Yeah, this is going to be hard. Yep, it's going to be triggering because I'm going to tell you right now, if you work with me, whatever triggers you, we are going to address those triggers. We're not going to avoid them. We're going to go headfirst into them over a period of time. Because if you avoid it, doesn't mean that it's going to go away. It's going to continue to control you. So ask yourself this question in closing. Are you going to let the trauma define you? Or are you going to let the trauma inspire you? Check it out.